I believe it is working. So, why don't you just tell me about when you were born, where you were born, and what it was like?
I was born in Los Angeles, and I was very lucky because I chose my parents carefully. And I had a father that I thought could do everything, and he did almost everything, and a mother that Og described as the iron butterfly.
The iron butterfly,
Yeah.
That's good.
She was the soft cell.
Oh, right.
The quiet,
Mm-hmm.
you know.
What was her name?
What
was her name?
Bernice.
Bernice, that's right.
Bernice.
Mm-hmm.
And she was, her parents came from Cornwall, and he was a miner. They did tin mining in Cornwall.
Oh, wow.
And when they came to the U.S., they were doing pretty much gold, some silver, but mostly they were after gold, mostly.
Mm-hmm.
They came after the main gold rush in the 49ers. So they came here, he came late 1800s, maybe about 1880 sometime.
And went to L.A.?
No, they went to the Sacramento area.
Mm-hmm.
And then she followed a few years later, my grandmother, whose name was Johanna.
Oh.
And she had a child in England that died early. And so she, and because of the pregnancy, she didn't travel. And so she was several years later. She arrived in San Francisco in the middle of summer, I think it was August, and she was wearing a red velvet suit. And she had made this long trip by boat and train across the country and lost a lot of weight, so the clothes were just hanging on her. And Sacramento at that time was really a village, you know. It was a dirty village is what it was.
Mm-hmm.
And full of miners, and they were dirty too. And she had come from probably maybe upper middle class, and all of a sudden she was cooking for miners and scrubbing on a bucket, and
Not what you envisioned, probably.
so she had to do a lot of adjusting in a hurry.
Yeah.
And she was also very English and really quite reserved and quite proper. But one of the things that amused me so, she said that John, their next child, was born 9 months and 1 hour after she arrived. Anyway, all the children, there were 4 children from that marriage that survived, and all of them were born at home without a doctor. None of them had any immunization, and they all lived to be just over or just short of 80 years.
Wow.
So 4 out of 4 is pretty good.
Yeah, and they're doing, they did something right there.
What else can I tell you about them?
So,
she was an excellent cook, and she made fabulous pastries and things. And even as a child, I knew when I went to Grandma's house it was going to be well worth the trip, because she was really good.
Do you have any particular ones that you remember? Like I remember my great grandma was known as Cookie Grandma or M&M Grandma. We remember those really good sugar cookies that she would have.
Mostly pastries and pasties, which are a meat turnover, and they're quite large, or the ones she made were large, and it's like beef or lamb and onions and potatoes in a pastry filling. And they would make them for the miners when they would go down into the mines, because they bake them early in the morning and wrap them in newspaper. And when they were down in the mines, they had a hot meal.
Oh, yeah.
And so
that's something to look forward to.
She made, and things with saffron in it, and the aroma of saffron cooking is just, it's heavenly. If you ever run into it, you'll know it. It's just wonderful stuff.
So to live to 80, you have to have saffron, eat a lot of saffron, and eat a lot of pasties.
Yes, and pastry, they lived for a long time in Jacksonville, Oregon. And at that time, things were good, and they were living very well in a lovely house. I have a picture of it, where Bernice was a real small child. She remembers that too. And then John went on a trip to Colorado to inspect a mine and became ill, and he couldn't get back, and he wasn't back for a year. So she was on her own, alone with 4 children.
For a whole year.
So they moved out of the big house in Jacksonville down to smaller quarters, and she went into business and ran a sweet shop.
Oh.
And the boys would make ice cream, and she did the baking, and they survived on that until he was able to come back home and go back to work.
So she had a sweet shop in Jacksonville, Oregon?
Mm-hmm.
What year do you think that was?
That would be early 1900s.
Oh, okay.
Bernice was born, and she was small there. Early 1900s. I could look. I have some records. I could look and tell you what year it was.
Okay, that'd be cool to see.
Have you ever gone into Jacksonville?
I don't believe so, no.
You should. It's just charming.
Yeah? Where is it?
Behind Medford.
Oh, okay.
Medford and where is the Shakespearean Theater?
Oh, yeah.
Well,
I just totally don't.
okay.
Yeah,
Ashland. It's between Ashland and Medford and out into the foothills. So
Oh, okay.
it's a small town. It was a mining town, and they were mining there. And so, anyway, they moved. They finally moved to Los Angeles, and then my parents were married in 1919. And I have a brother, Don Pearson, who is deceased, and we were both born in Los Angeles. And then we lived for a long time in Santa Barbara.
Ooh.
And I love Santa Barbara, even as a child. I remember the parks and the creeks, and it was a lovely little. It was not much more than a village. It was really a town, a small town.
When was that, do you think?
I'm sorry?
When did you move to Santa Barbara?
Probably 1927, 1928, maybe somewhere
So you were
along
young.
there. Yes.
Yeah.
And we lived there for several years, and then the Depression hit, and there was no work. My father was a tile setter,
Mm.
and he worked on the Santa Barbara courthouse. And if you ever go through Santa Barbara, you should go see it, because it's a gorgeous building. It's
With his handiwork.
it's a let's see how to say it. It's a California interpretation of Spanish colonial stuff.
Okay, yeah.
And it's a lovely, lovely building, and it's still in use. And the tile in there is really good. And he did buildings in some of the church domes in Ventura, and he did the auto club in downtown Los Angeles, the original building down there. And then when the Depression came along, there was no work. And so they moved to Los Angeles and bought I think it was 5 acres. And it had an old farmhouse on it and an old barn. And the house was really pretty primitive. But my father, fortunately, he did everything. He was a carpenter and a furniture maker and painter and an electrician and an auto mechanic and he made his own hardware for the doors and the cupboards and things, and he painted and he wrote bad poetry, just really bad stuff. And he loved to dance, so there was always something going on. And he actually rebuilt this old broken down house, and then outside in the back garden there was an enormous African pepper tree that was really beautiful. It has this great big arching flow thing to it. Beautiful stuff. And he built a patio. The tile floors that he put in the patio came out of the 1933 earthquake in Los Angeles. And they had so many buildings collapse, and they took them all to the dump. So he went to the dump and retiled this patio. So
Wow.
So we had a tile patio, and in the center of it he had a Navajo Thunderbird.
Oh wow.
It was pretty great.
That's cool. Do you know if that house or any of that is still around?
It was 15 years ago it was there.
Oh, it was?
And it was being used, yeah.
Really? Was the
So
patio still
it
there?
was probably on the way to 100 years old when we got there. And he just rebuilt the whole thing, you know, and made it into really a very livable place.
Do you know do you remember the address of that? That'd be interesting to look up.
It was on Budlong Avenue. I don't know if I can come up with the house number or not.
Budlong Avenue in Los
I'll
Angeles?
probably think of it in the middle of the night or something.
Yeah. But it's Los Angeles proper?
I'm sorry?
It's in Los Angeles?
Yes, yeah. So let's see, what else can I tell you about that?